Good morning. It's early in the morning here in my hut in Hawaii. I wanted to offer some reflections after our groups this week, and yet because so much of what it is that I have to share may be relevant for other people, other of my students who are in spaces of offering instruction to others, I'm going to be speaking in a general way and making this publicly available. So just know for my MMTCP students that this is coming as a result of the conversations that we just had, and thank you for those rich conversations. I want to talk about taking the seat. So as people who are in the position of facilitating, one of the things that we need to do is take our seat. And the word that I was given when I was trying to describe being king, queen, or non-binary of the realm is the word liege. Liege of the realm is a non-binary person who is in a position of power. So as we take our seat and feel strength and confidence, feel the Dharma flowing through us, feel the power of being able to choose and to decide. There's enormous creativity in that. There's enormous strength in that. There's enormous beauty in that. And yet, one of the things that we need to recognize in that power is that the power that we have is the power to serve, the power to respond, the power to assess what is necessary and helpful and bring that forward. So as we take our seat, there's a koan that we have to hold. And the koan is, how do we hold power, humility, and the knowledge that we can't get it right, that there's no way that we're going to know exactly what's needed for all of the people in our space, that we're going to have exactly the response that everyone is going to be able to melt into. And yet we show up. We show up with confidence. We show up with strength. We show up as the Dhamma that flows through the vehicle of our body, heart, and mind. In strength, in surrender, and in recognition. We can't get it right. So one of the things that came up very strongly, several questions in one of the groups, is how do we create trauma-informed mindfulness, recognizing so many of us are dealing with trauma, so many of our students are dealing with trauma. Just to normalize it, within my own students in this group, people who are training to be teachers, 30% are dealing with trauma. And in our general population, I think we can expect at least that amount, perhaps more. I've heard Jack Kornfield say that there can be at least 60% of people in a space that are experiencing trauma, and maybe more depending on how you measure trauma. Ancestral trauma, systemic trauma, racist trauma from racism or homophobia, or racism from being a female in a world that is dominated by men and male values. Whatever it is, there's trauma in our systems. So when we are setting up a space, I'm grateful that in our course there's a whole module going to be dedicated to working with trauma. And so this is not to preempt that, and this is not to say that this is just responding to the questions that came up and offering my own 2 cents worth. And so again, when we come back to holding the seat, we're in a position of power. Our power is optimally used in service, and we can't get it right. That koan. So when we bring that koan to trauma-informed mindfulness presentations, let's see what arises. First of all, remembering for everybody who's in the MMTCP that the level of discernment and refinement that I'm speaking about is not required for this course. It just came up as a question and as some of the responses to how do you do that from interests among students. So there's no need. This is just extra. But if we are recognizing that a significant number of people are showing up with trauma, then what we can do is normalize it. We can name it. We can say, people are here from all different levels of experience. Some are sitting with ease and comfort. Many are not. And that's common. There's nothing that you need to feel in order to feel like you need to belong. You're welcome here, just exactly where you are. But what's important to remember is that the basic instructions, please come, sit down, close your eyes, be still, pay attention to the sensations in your breath, follow your sensations in your body, stay with unpleasant sensations. Every single one of these instructions may not be available or may be triggering to somebody who's dealing with trauma. So, what to do? Well, all of us who are navigating any kinds of trauma ourselves need to become discerning. First of all, that we are able to notice the difference between mindfulness and dissociation, between mindfulness and a freeze response, between a little bit of agitation that we can be aware of in our mind and the kind of agitation that takes us out of our capacity to be present. So as facilitators, the more that we understand this territory and how it works in ourself, the more we are going to have capacity to create context that supports others to engage with mindfulness in a way that is skillful, easeful, furthering. So again, when we take the seat in the position of liege of the realm, holding power, name it, normalize it, front load a little bit of information that gives people some capacity to discern the difference between mindfulness and freeze or dissociation. Introduce the ideas of windows of tolerance and let people know that what we are working towards is ease and comfort in our nervous system, rather than challenge or dysregulation in our nervous system. Begin with exercises that help regulate. David Trelevin has a book, Trauma-Informed Mindfulness. It's filled with exercises that are really lovely, that help us regulate. Simple ones can be just letting your eyes move around the space, looking around, including behind you. Noticing the absence of danger. Tapping, humming, rocking, singing, clapping. All of these are practices that are regulating to the nervous system. And then create or get much more used to or familiar with invitational rather than directive language or circles of optimal, circles of options. Let's put it that way, circles of options. So if we're working towards coming, sitting down, closing our eyes, being still, paying attention to the breath, tracking our sensations, then if people are not able to sit down, we invite standing. If they're not able to stand still, we invite shifting from one foot to the next. If that is not yet enough of a match to meet them where they're at, we invite them gently walking back and forth in the back of the room. If closing the eyes is not skillful, keeping the eyes partially open. If the breath is not available, we can put our hands on our heart and our belly and feel the sensation of the movement with our hands moving. And when we are engaged in any kind of mindfulness practice where we are tracking something that is unpleasant, it's really important to oscillate that with what is nourishing, what is gentle, what is calming, what is restorative, what is easeful. So rather than latch on to an unpleasant sensation, we oscillate back and forth between touching something that's difficult and resourcing ourselves with something that is easeful. Watching to notice that the general trend is that our system is developing more ease and more capacity, rather more tightness and more contraction. So one of the challenges is that when a person is in a froze or freeze state, they have very little agency to act. And so they're just kind of sitting there immobilized. But as soon as there is some capacity to act, then we want to encourage movement, encourage engagement, encourage connection. So again, coming back to the first premise, holding the koan, liege of the realm, we are holding the seat, we have the capacity, we are empowered, the Dhamma flows through us. We do that in service. We do that to support what is needed. Recognizing we can't get it right. There's no way we're going to be able to know all of the circumstances of the people who show up in our space. But what we can do is respond when we notice something that needs a response. We can begin to discern what it looks like when somebody is mindful as opposed to when somebody's disassociating or in a freeze state. Certainly when somebody's agitated or when somebody is feeling irritable, the signs of that are often much more obvious. But as we hold that seat, hold the power, liege of the realm, do it in service, recognizing we can't get it right. There's this gentle flow between our own tracking internally of where we're at and what we notice, allowing our attention to move outward, seeing what we notice in our students, and responding. So this is my share for now. I hope you're well. And I'd like to once again encourage this practice of contemplating our good qualities and the gifts that we bring to our leadership, to our teaching. It's a really important practice. It's inevitable as we move through the journey that we come in contact with places where we experience our own doubt, our own sense of we're not good enough, we're not realized enough, we're not experienced enough, we're not energetic enough, whatever it is. And that in contrast to the doubts that we have, if we take time to create a list of the qualities that we bring to our teaching, to our leadership, to our facilitation, the qualities, the intelligence, the creativity, the strength, the insight, the sensitivity, the discernment. And we have that available. Then as our doubts come up and as we come across challenges, we have a little bit of ballast of where we can focus our attention to remind ourselves of the qualities that we have that are skillful, that are wholesome, that are furthering. And let that help us decide what's the next response. Bye for now.